The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So yesterday, Donald Trump had a meeting, or a couple days ago, earlier in the week, Donald Trump had a meeting with House Republicans to talk about how they might be able to deal with this immigration crisis that has presented itself front and center, I think, in national media. And Congressman Mark Sanford from South Carolina, you might remember him as the former governor of South Carolina who escaped, or just flew to, I guess would be a better term, Argentina with his Argentinian mistress, and his staff said he was hiking the Appalachian Trail, but really he was in Argentina. That guy who eventually left the governorship, he won a congressional election and now is back in politics as Congressman Mark Sanford. He was in the room with other House Republicans and Trump during this meeting on Tuesday, and Trump referred to him as a nasty guy. And Sanford has been a critic of Trump over time, and he lost his Republican primary last week. So even though he did win, he is on his way out. Trump endorsed Sanford's opponent hours earlier. And Trump said in the room, there were about 200 House Republicans in the room. Trump said something along the lines of, I want to congratulate him on running a great race.
Oh, man.
But that he's also a nasty guy. And I don't even understand what Trump is doing. Like, is it a joke? Is it Trump being confrontational? I don't know how to understand this.
Yesterday, we did an interview with Tamler Sommers on the topic of honor.
Yes.
Donald Trump has absolutely no honor, no sense of sportsmanship. The guy's already down. He lost his primary. You won, dude. Just let him be.
What exactly is so nasty about him? I guess like Trump likes to use that phrase, if you're critical of Trump, you're just being a nasty person. Is that the gist of it?
Yeah, I mean, I know Mark Sanford did have that whole controversy, right? And he lost his marriage over it, but
nothing Trump hasn't done.
He seems like well-mannered. I mean, I've seen him on talk shows and everything, and he conducts himself at least okay. I don't know how his policies are, but, you know, he's cordial.
Sanford was asked about it by the Washington Post and said that the comment about him being a nasty guy by Trump, quote, goes to the core of why I have at times agreed with policies of the administration, but at the same time found the president's personal style so caustic and counterproductive. And I guess Mark Sanford is in all senses going to be sailing off into the sunset.
Well, you know, after Donald Trump called Hillary Clinton a nasty woman, that term was co-opted, and I remember they started selling nasty woman T-shirts.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see the same ones for Mark Sanford. You'll see a big picture of Mark Sanford and nasty guy right below it.
You know what I don't get about the co-opting of some of these terms? When Hillary Clinton was called, remember when Trump said she's a nasty, nasty woman during a debate or something like that? Then all sorts of other Hillary supporters and just generally progressive women started saying, I'm a nasty woman as well. I support a $15 minimum wage and gender equality, whatever, right? Whatever policy you wanted to attribute to that. And the right lampooned the fact that women turned the phrase around and said, we're all nasty women and we're voting against Trump or whatever. But then when Hillary Clinton called the right deplorables, the right did the exact same thing. They said, we are the deplorables that are going to keep Hillary Clinton out of the White House. What's the difference? What is the difference? You're in both cases, it's just the co-opting, the attempt to sort of diffuse the strength of a term by applying it to yourself and depriving it of the strength or value that maybe it was intended to have. Yeah. Isn't it just an obvious double standard?
Well, I think it's just trying to turn the tables around. I think it's a good strategy, right?
I
don't
think
know if
it's
it's necessarily
good,
a double standard.
Yeah, well, it's a double standard because the right laughed at the left appropriating the term, but then did the exact same thing with deplorables.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Can I make one more comment on the story?
Please.
Isn't it true that when you went to Argentina last year, that was actually a lie and you were hiking the Appalachian Trail?
Yeah, I did the opposite. I would be more embarrassed for people to know I was hiking the Appalachian Trail because people know about how often I get tick bites when I go hiking. So I lied and said I was visiting family in Argentina and was hiking the Appalachian Trail.
The reverse Sanford.
Without my mistress. So I actually did a total reversal. Smith Wesson is a firearms manufacturer based in Springfield, Massachusetts, just minutes from the birthplace of the David Pakman Show. And I actually have friends that work at Smith Wesson. I'll call them acquaintances, I think is a better term. Smith & Wesson is not doing well, and it's actually American Outdoor Brands that is the sort of parent company that owns Smith & Wesson, and they're reporting plunging sales, and they are blaming social activists for the decline. This could not be more wrong, okay? Here's how it works with gun sales. When the social activists succeed at making it seem as though there might be restrictions placed on guns, gun sales go off the charts. We saw it under Obama after Sandy Hook. You saw, I guess, what I would call the closest thing to a victory around tightening up gun safety regulations. And you had record gun sales under Obama. You had maximum activation of so-called social activists, and the gun sales went crazy, and there were no confiscations of guns. Now you have an administration that has no interest whatsoever in passing gun safety legislation. You have a House and Senate controlled by Republicans, which has no interest in passing any real gun safety legislation. They may throw some bones out there like banning bump stocks, which by and large aren't even sold by these manufacturers. They're often aftermarket parts or third-party parts. And the reason that fewer people are buying guns right now is because they don't believe that their guns are threatened. If you don't think someone's coming for your guns, if you don't think that next week you might no longer be able to get some of the guns that you can get today, you don't feel a rush to go out and buy guns. It has everything to do with a gun-friendly administration, why gun sales are down, and nothing to do with so-called social activists.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That is the correct observation. I think you can look at that objectively, but Smith and Wesson can't come out and say that themselves, right? So they have to lie. They have to say that it's the social activists on the left, because that will trigger their supporters to go out there and buy guns to retaliate against the left.
If Smith and Wesson came out and said, you know, it makes sense to maybe take a break from the feverish buying of weapons because there's already 400 million weapons owned by civilians in the United States. Nobody's coming to take your guns. So we get it. Why would anybody buy any more guns? They can't do that. That's a self-inflicted death sentence, right? So you're right. They have to say something like this.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense why there are fewer gun sales now as compared to under the Obama administration. Absolutely right. But also gun sales are down as compared to last year, 2017, when Trump was in office. So I don't know a clear explanation of that.
Oh, I do.
Since then, we've had 2 mass shootings, right, at schools. Parkland, actually Vegas was since then too. A lot of mass shootings, one in Texas.
It's just that you don't see the full decline in the urgency to buy guns right away. So there was massive urgency to buy guns under Obama. Trump became president of the United States. People started to realize, oh, that urgency to buy guns is starting to go away. But some people don't even know why they were buying all the guns. They just knew there was a frenzy around buying guns. So it takes some time, right? Some people realize they don't need to go crazy buying guns during year 1 of the Trump presidency, and then some people during year 2. So I think it's just, it happens in waves. I think that there's a pretty straightforward explanation to that.
I also did a story this week about how there are more guns than people in the United States. There are about 325 million people and about 400 million guns.
Yeah,
Is
like
it possible that we just, have sold enough guns and people, there's not as much demand?
We've saturated the market. No, you know why I would say no? Because guns do get taken out of service, and guns kind of like age out, and eventually you like retire a gun. I don't know what you exactly do, if you take it apart or maybe just toss it in a recycling bin, like in the Boston Common or something like that. I don't know how you get rid of it. But people do have this need to replace guns, much like we do with our missiles that the government is constantly repurchasing. So yeah, I don't know if we've reached peak saturation at this point. Lyft, the competitor to Uber, is now testing subscription plans that are sort of like you would subscribe to Netflix or Spotify Premium. And the idea is that a lot of the competition between Uber, Lyft, and other smaller competitors has been based on price, right? Because when Uber rolls out something new like ride pooling between you and other riders that you don't necessarily know, Lyft and Uber both roll that out. The ability to split fares, they both roll that out. And ultimately, you end up with a competition on price, which isn't really good for either Uber or Lyft, because if they compete on price for market share, they end up over the long term losing money, unless you can compete on price so effectively that you knock out the other competitor altogether, right? Like if Uber undercuts Lyft significantly for long enough at a loss, maybe they drive Lyft out of business, then they can raise prices, but by and large, it's not considered that that's going to happen. So the idea from Lyft is to develop a subscription program, And the idea of that would be that you get people either prepaying. There's a number of different ways that it's being considered. You might be buying a package of rides that you might be prepaying for. You could pay a monthly cost, which will then give you a discount off of rides or maybe rides of certain types. But I actually think that this is a very, very interesting model. And we've seen it work really well with Netflix. The benefit of, I don't know if people, I know that there's people in our audience who like when we do like business analysis stories and people who don't, but I think this is pretty interesting. The benefit of a subscription model is that you can more accurately predict revenue. So Netflix, for example, people aren't buying individual pieces of content. So once Netflix knows what is our subscriber acquisition rate, what is our churn rate, in other words, how many people are canceling sort of on a regular basis, here's how we can project what our monthly revenue is going to be, and it's not tied to the actual usage of people watching stuff on Netflix. With membership, that is something that we experience over time, right?
Yep.
Memberships vary in terms of exact number, but over time, we can start to predict what is the growth rate of memberships and what is the credit card expired rate, at which point people's payments fail, so on and so forth. So I think that this is a very, very interesting idea and I prefer Lyft over Uber for political reasons as well, I should say.
Helps the consumers too, because I think transportation is one of those things that people want to budget out over time. Like say you're commuting to work and you're taking the subway, you can calculate, all right, that costs me $5 per day. I work 20 times a month and you have a grand total. Same thing for if you're driving a car. Gas is $3 a gallon. I drive 10 miles to work and back. You can budget that out, and maybe it's like transportation overall, your third or fourth greatest expense for the course of the month.
Sure.
If you have a subscription plan, you know what it's going to be. It's going to be $200 every month, $300 every month.
Yeah.
People like that a lot more than, oh, there's a lot more traffic today. It's going to cost you $20 versus, oh, it's pretty light. You'll get there for $3.
So Lyft is looking at moving some of the plans similar to the ones you just mentioned out of testing phase only. Uber is only beginning to experiment with this stuff, and there is an all-access plan Lyft is considering, which would be $299 a month. And that would give you 30 rides of up to $15. So that's actually a savings, right? Because 30 times 15 would be 300 and 150, 450. So you're basically saving 33% by prepaying for 30 rides of up to $15. Of course, if you don't use all 30 rides, then you have to actually calculate whether you've lost or come out ahead. And if you have a ride that's more than $15, you just pay the difference. So you're basically paying $10 a ride for $15 rides and then just paying the difference in a sense. Interesting model. I know that there's people who don't live in cities who hear us talk about this and they say, what the hell are you talking about? $300 for 30? Like, there's one guy who drives Lyft in my town and I don't know. It's a whole different world in the cities, Pat. I think you've learned that by now.
I get worried sometimes when we talk too much about Boston-centric stories because we go into like the different subway lines and the neighborhoods around here. And I realize most of the audience doesn't live in this part of the world.
But I think as long as we're clear about what we're referencing, people do enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's what I get from the audience, that they like, as long as they understand the context when we talk about why the Green Line is considered to be the worst subway line in Boston. If we just reference it in passing, it's kind of like an inside joke to anybody who doesn't live in Boston. But if we explain the context of it, I think that for the most part, the feedback is pretty positive. People like hearing about, you know, the day-to-day of what it's like to live in Boston. If I'm wrong about that, let me know, because then I would like to know that. Inside scoop that only anybody who comes to Boston would be able to immediately find out. That's it for today's bonus show. Talk to you tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.